It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Senegal. Part 2, the selections. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is a continuation of Series 31 on the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is part 2 of our coverage of Senegal's players. The final roster is released and we are looking at the selections of Senegal. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation from after the 2023 African Cup, which took place in January 2024, up until the October 2025 games. We considered a few other factors as well, and we gave some biographical / career information on the main players to help you to get to know them better. In part 2 here, our focus is on the selections, especially the final selections. Before we get into that, though, we want to let you know that in the springtime of 2026, probably April, we will start producing episodes for the 2026 World Cup, which takes place, of course, in the summer of 2026. Keep an eye out for that then, or better yet, subscribe to the channel and it'll notify you when the episodes come out. This mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1, just like in part 1, is some team information, a little less this time. Section 2 is the main part of the mediacast. We review the list that we compiled in part 1. We're going to tell you who made the preliminary and the final squad there. And we're also trying to predict starters. So we took steps towards that in part 1 by providing a narrative of each position over the period. And in part 2 here, we'll examine the lineups in games played after October 2025 to see if they give us any further clues as to who will start. And finally, we'll make our predictions on the starters. In section 3, we're going to start with a spotlight review. That's a quick run through the players who made the squad and our predicted starters. And we'll also review some surprise selections and non-selections, any new players added to the final squad, as well as updating on injuries. All right, that is it for the intro. Let's move on to section 1 and cover some information on the team here. In part 1, we looked at club affiliations of players, the games they played over the recent period, and their preferred formations. Here we're focusing on what the teams published. In the previous Cup, in both of the African Cups, 2023 and this 2025, they had to submit a 55-man preliminary or provisional roster to CAF, the organisers of the tournament. In the 2023 African Cup, CAF published those, but some teams didn't like it. They felt it had a negative effect on the teams. This time, I'm not sure we were actually able to get the actual roster submitted to CAF. I used AI and did get a 55-man roster, but I'm a bit suspicious that it's not completely accurate. Anyway, we are using it as the 55-man provisional roster, and if it has some mistakes, we'll maybe discover that to our embarrassment later on. Anyway, teams were allowed to bring 28 players to the tournament, so that means from the 55-man preliminary squad that we're using here, they will have to cut, or 27 of the players will have to be cut. Now, before we move on to section 2 and see who those players were, let's take a look at the games that Senegal played after World Cup qualifying finished in October 2025. So we have 2 friendlies to go by here. The first one was against Brazil in England. We're not particularly interested in the scores, but I'm sure you'll want to know if you don't know. That was a 2-0 loss to the Brazilian squad there. And 3 days later, on November 18th, in Turkey, they played Kenya, and that was a smashing 8-0 win there. And those are the scores, but we're more interested in the lineups for those games to see if they give us hints as to who is going to start in the cup. I just got to clear my throat because I sound like a frog. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Right, we're ready to move on to section 2 on our main business of the candidates and their selection. So let's begin with the manager. And we have Pape Thiaw in charge. They're pronouncing the name of a player in the Premier League with the same last name, more like Cho. I'm sure that's wrong, but I'm guessing it's something in between, like Theo, or something like that. It's a difficult name to say, though. And nevertheless, he is the manager guiding them through. We're going to put him in green as if he was selected for the final squad. And I just want to remind you that he came in October of 2024. So the African Cup games in January of 2024 were under manager Aliou Cisse, and so were the early games in the period that we looked at. So we do see some changes happening under Theo there, and we'll point those out where relevant. Okay, let's move on to goalkeepers. And we had a definite candidate in Maury Diaw, and he was selected for the final squad. And likely candidates, we had 2 of them, Edward Mendy, and he was selected for the squad, and Yevan Diouf, newcomer. That's what the orange text, if you're looking at the YouTube, indicates, is that he came in during this period and was selected for the final squad. We had a possible candidate in Samba Mbalo. He wasn't even selected for the preliminary squad. However, both of our seemingly off the squad player, both veterans here, Seny Dieng, well, not really a veteran, but the fact that his name is in black text on the YouTube video or on the graphic that we're using indicates he's been through a tournament. The dark grey text of Alfred Gomez, the other one, indicates he's retired from international soccer. However, he was selected for the preliminary squad, so who knows, that may mean he's still in the picture to some degree. We also have 2 new candidates, both of them, though, just made the preliminary squad. The first one is Cheick Ndoye, or Cheick Lo Ndoye, and the other one, Binguru Kamara. Both of those just selected for the preliminary squad. So 3 keepers here. You might think that by Maury Diaw being the definite candidate, that indicates he's the starter. That's usually the case, but it's a bit deceptive here because he is not. Likely candidate Edward Mendy is the starter. In part 1, we were just looking at the likelihood of making the final squad, and Maury Diaw participated in more games over the period than Edward Mendy actually. Again, not starting, but being called up. So he was a definite candidate. Anyway, we're going to look at what we thought at the end of part 1. Unfortunately, we can't give you the summary the narrative that we created over the last 2 years, participation in this position over the last 2 years, because that would make the mediacast too long. But we're kind of going to give you the fruits of that. We didn't talk about starters in part 1, but we did make note of what we thought. So here it is. It's kind of a nutshell of the summary, really. We thought Edward Mendy would be the likely starter, and we thought Maury Diaw would be the backup keeper or the second string keeper there. Let's look at the November friendlies and see. Edward Mendy sorry, I did have a little summary of the narrative that we did, so I might as well say that over the past 2 years, Edward Mendy was the starting keeper, despite only starting 11 of their 18 games. Actually, that's why he was at the likely level. He did, however, play 3 of the last 4 games. Maury Diaw started the last one. So that his absences does give us insight into the second string keeper, and that's why we think Maury Diaw is the second string keeper. But in November, we see that Mendy did start both of those friendlies, so that strengthened our resolve that Edward Mendy will be the starter. We're actually going to move him up from the likely to the definite level there. We're going to indicate that by putting 3 stars beside his name. 3 meaning definite, 2 likely, and 1 possible. And we remain fairly certain that Maury Diaw is the backup keeper or the second string keeper there. Okay, let's move on to defenders, and we will look at central defenders. And we begin with our 3 definite candidates here. Kalidou Koulibaly was selected for the final squad. Moussa Niakhaté also selected, and so was the third one, Abdoulaye Seck. So all 3 of our definite candidates selected there. No candidates at the likely level, actually, but at the possible level, we had Abdou Diallo. He only made the preliminary squad there, but not the final cut. We also had a newcomer, Mustafa Mbo. Sorry, let me say that again. Mustafa Mbo, and he didn't even make the preliminary squad there. But again, here too, our 2 seemingly off the squad candidates did make the preliminary squad. The first one was Abdoulaye Ndiaye there, and the second one, Seydou Sano. So we only have 3 central defenders making the final squad. That is pretty thin. Usually it's 5 or 6. But we do have a newcomer, 3 newcomers, but actually only one of them made the final squad. So even 4 is pretty thin. But here we have it. The newcomer is Mamadou Sarr. We're going to introduce him because we promised we would in part 1. We would introduce unlikely players or new players that did make the squad. First, let's look at the 2 candidates who just made the preliminary squad, or at least throw their names out. The first one is Mikhail Faye, and the second, Aruna Sangate. Both of those making the preliminary squad. But the only one we are going to look at is Mamadou Faye, been with Senegal. New to the squad here. He appeared on the bench in one of the November games and then started one. So that's his only experience with the national team. Mamadou Sarr is 20 years old, and he's on the roster of Chelsea in England since 2025, but actually is on loan out to Strasbourg in France, and that's the team he came from to come to Chelsea. Prior to that, he was with Lyon and Lyon's youth club there before that. So he was born in France, Mamadou Sarr, and he makes the squad here. And there we have it, 4 central defenders. Let us look at the recent games, or no, let's begin with what we thought at the end of part 1. So we thought that Kalidou Koulibaly would be a definite starter, Moussa Niakhaté a likely starter, and Abdoulaye Seck a possible starter there. So in the first of the November friendlies, the typical pairing of Kalidou Koulibaly and Moussa Niakhaté featured. In the second, though, it seemed a bit more experimental. Neither of those, Koulibaly did start there in a 3-man defence alongside Abdoulaye Seck and newcomer Mamadou Sarr there. So it doesn't really change our thinking that much. We still think Kalidou Koulibaly will be a definite starter there, and we still think Moussa Niakhaté is likely. The only change is we're going to add the newcomer Musasar to the possible, along with Sak. We think they have kind of an equal chance of starting. So just possible starters, those two. All right, that's it for central defence, and we'll move to the left back position. And we start with our definite candidate. It is newcomer El Hadj Malik Diouf. El Hadj Malik Diouf was selected for the final squad. And likely candidate Ismail Jacobs, also selected for the final squad there. We had none at the possible level, but possible but unlikely Moussa Daye, not even making the preliminary squad. But once again, our seemingly off the squad player did make the preliminary squad. That's Fode Ballo-Touré, at least making the preliminary squad there. And we have a newcomer in Abdallah Dower. I say newcomer, he's actually been around for a while. But new in the sense that we didn't present him in part one, and that's because he hadn't played for the team in 2024 or 2025. So we kind of add him to the list again. Let's take a look at what we thought at the end of part one there. And, well, what happened there is that Ismail Jacobs was the starter under the old manager. He was a starter in the previous cup and in the early part of the period. But under the new manager, newcomer El Hadj Malik Diouf took over the position. When we look at the November friendlies here, we see actually Jacobs did start the first November friendly and El Hadj Malik Diouf started the second. So perhaps it is a rotation. We still give Diouf the edge because we think the new manager seems to favour him a bit more. But we're going to say, sorry, I think we didn't say before we had El Hadj Malik Diouf as a definite starter at the end of part one and Ismail Jacobs as the backup for the position. We're going to change that slightly and put El Hadj Malik Diouf now as the likely starter and Ismail Jacobs as a possible starter. Okay, that's what it looks like to us. Let's move over to the right side of defence. And here they've been struggling to find actually players coded as right midfielders. So they've had basically central defenders or players in other positions stepping in. In fact, the one covering the position most over the period has been Crepin Diatta. We consider him a definite candidate. He's coded as a right midfielder, probably more of a right attacking midfielder there. Crepin Diatta was selected for the final squad. We had a likely candidate in Antoine Mendy there, and he was also selected for the squad. Next, we have actually a player coded as a right back, so they did bring one in, and it is Eli Kamara. Eli Kamara. Eli Kamara was selected for the final squad. However, he was injured just before the tournament there and ended up being replaced. So we will put him in a pink highlight here to show that he has been replaced on the final squad. We'll talk about that injury in part three. And then we had at the seemingly off the squad level, foremost Mendy, and the pattern continues of our seemingly off the squad players making the preliminary squad, at least foremost Mendy on the preliminary squad. We have a new candidate here, or one that wasn't on our list in part one. That was Noah Fadiga, but he only made the preliminary squad there. Whoops. I put the wrong graphic in there. Okay, so that leaves us with Crepin Diatta and Antoine Mendy as the only two making the squad. It's no surprise that they didn't replace Ile Camara with another right back because they've been struggling to find one. In fact, even Antoine Mendy, we've only recently recoded him to being a right back, but he really is a central defender that became a right back, probably because they have struggled to find one. Anyway, at the end of part one, our thinking was that out of position Crepin Diatta would still be the likely starter. They don't seem to fully be behind Antoine Mendy as a replacement for him. So they're sticking with the out of position player. We do have Antoine Mendy as the first backup here. And at the end of part one, we thought Foremost Mendy might also be a backup player. Of course, he wasn't selected, so we'll have to take him off our list. Okay, let's look at the November game. So actually, Crepin Diatta was out. He was not selected due to a minor injury, an eye injury, at least for the first November game, but he wasn't called up for the second one either. So Antoine Mendy started the first game and Ile Camara the second. And so, yes, I was thinking that in Camara they had perhaps found the right back that could take over from Crepin. However, he was ruled out injured there and replaced, as we saw. So they kind of have to stick with the out of position players that they have. So we're also basically sticking with what we thought as Crepin Diatta as the likely starter and Antoine Mendy as a possible starter. The only difference is we took Foremost Mendy off the list there. All right, that's it for defense, and we move on upfield to the defensive midfield. And we'll go by coded position here. So we'll look at the defensive midfielders first. We have none at the definite level, but we have Papa Gueye at the likely level, and he was selected for the squad. Next, we have Mamadou Camara. Mamadou Camara just making the preliminary squad. However, he was brought back in to replace. We're actually going to see that there were two players replaced just before the cup. Ile Camara was one of them. Mamadou Camara here was brought back in to the squad to replace him. So we're going to put him in yellow highlight to indicate that. And by the way, that is Mamadou Lamine Camara, because we have another Mamadou Camara coming up. So we're going to call him Mamadou Lamine Camara, ultimately selected for the squad. Our second possible candidate, though, Nampalys Mendy, just making the preliminary squad there. And the third one, Cheick Niasse, a newcomer, not even making the preliminary squad. Our possible but unlikely candidate, though, Dion Lopi, was selected for the preliminary squad at least, but not making the final cut. And we have no new candidates coded as defensive midfielders to add here. So we just have the two candidates there, Papa Gueye and Mamadou Lamine Camara. We're going to look at the central midfielders before we make our predictions on the starters in the central midfield. So let us go to there. We have three candidates at the definite level coded as central midfielders. The first one, Idrissa Gueye, was selected. In fact, all three of them were. The second one, Pape Matar Sarr. Was selected. And Habib Diarra overcame an injury to be selected for the squad as well. Next, we have, sorry, I said before we had two Mamadou Camaras on the team. What we have is two Lamine Camaras. So we'll still call Mamadou Lamine Camara that way. And this one is Lamine Camara, and he was selected for the squad. So watch out for confusion there. And our second likely candidate also selected for the final squad, that is Pathé Ciss. So we have 5 central defenders along with the 2 defensive midfielders. At the seemingly off the squad level, we continue the pattern of these players making the preliminary squad. Chaku Kyote selected for the preliminary squad, as well as Rasul Daye. So both of those players seem to be off the squad, but not perhaps as much as it seemed. We have a new candidate here, just making the preliminary squad. It is Pape Demba Diop, selected for the preliminary squad there. Let's go and see what we had. Well, this is probably the most difficult position to predict here. They have a lot of candidates, and quite a few of them kind of came in and out over the period. We landed on Idrissa Gueye as a likely starter, and then possible starters Pape Matar Sarr and Pape Gueye. That's what we thought. When we look at the recent games, it was probably the pairing we would most expect, Idrissa Gueye and Pape Matar Sarr in the first game. But again, here the second game looked a bit more experimental with Pathé Ciss and Pape Gueye starting as a pair in the second game. So we're going to stick with our original prediction there, but we do think that Habib Diarra, now that he's recovered from injury, if he is recovered enough, could be a possible starter. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to give 2 stars to Idrissa Gueye. I'd say more like 2.5, really. And we're going to give 1 star to a few players, Pape Matar Sarr, defensive midfielder, Pape Gueye there. And also, I just have a sneaking suspicion that Habib Diarra will get a start. Perhaps not much in the first game, which is really what we're predicting. But there we have it. Okay, that is central midfield, and we move slightly upfield. Now, we are going to look at a left midfielder who was added to the squad here, and it is Ousseynou Niang. We're not really sure what his position is here because he doesn't have any caps for the national team, but he's coded as a left midfielder. Initially, he just made the preliminary squad, but he is the second of the players brought in to cover an injury. We haven't met the second injured player yet, but Ousseynou Niang recalled to the team to cover that injury. So we will introduce him. He is 24 years old. As I said, no caps for the national team. In fact, even in the November friendlies, he was not selected. So new to the squad, never having been selected prior to being named to the preliminary and then the final squad. Ousseynou Niang plays for Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium since 2024, and he has played for a couple of teams in Latvia after leaving Senegal there in 2022. Okay, that is Ousseynou Niang, and I just want to go back and mention that we didn't introduce Mamadou Lamine Camara because we did that in part 1. He had actually been a possible candidate on the squad, so we did talk about him there. It's time to move upfield to left attackers here, and we begin with a definite candidate in Sadio Mane, and he was selected for the final squad. And we also had a likely candidate in Cheick Sabali. Cheick Sabali also selected for the squad. So not many surprises at all here for Senegal. We have 3 new candidates as left attacking midfielders. The first one made the squad, Assane Diao. However, he is our second player who was withdrawn from the squad due to injury. And so Niang, who we just met, is basically replacing him, Asan Dio. I don't know if there's any point in introducing him since he didn't make the squad there, which is unfortunate for him, but perhaps we'll see him in the future. We also have two other candidates just making the preliminary squad. The first one, Amara Diouf, and the second one, Papa Amadou Diallo, making the preliminary squad there. Let's go back and see what we thought at the end of part one. Well, we was Sadio Mane as a definite starter. However, he didn't actually start all that many games as the left attacking midfielder here. He started 13 of their 18 games, but some of those 13s were as a forward there. So there were players coming in to replace him, whether through absence or being in a different position. But really, it wasn't Czech Sabali. It was a variety of players, actually. We're going to beat them as right attacking midfield and central attacking midfielders there. Czech Sabali didn't start any games over the period. And so where does that leave us in terms of the backup? Well, we're just going to say that the backup is various. It's various players backing him up. Okay, so and actually we have an example of that in the November games because Pape Sarr, the central midfielder that we just met, Pape Sarr stepped in for him in the first of the November friendlies. Sadio Mane was on the field, but starting as a forward, as he sometimes does. So Pape Sarr was not the stand-in that we would expect, to be honest. In the second game, it was Mane starting as a left attacking midfielder. So we're going to stick with what we got. Sadio Mane as a definite starter, and the backup, just various players. We're not going to predict a starter there. I wonder if we should put Mane as 2 stars, a likely starter over here, because he's also a possible starter at the forward level. I think I'm going to do that. No, I'll just leave it the way it is. He'll definitely be a starter on the field. Okay, let's go to the right side. And on the right side, we have a definite candidate in Ismail Assar. And Ismail Assar was selected for the squad. We also have a possible candidate in Abdallah Sima, but he was only selected for the preliminary squad there. We have a new candidate, though, making the squad, an exciting one, just a 17-year-old Ibrahim Mbaye. And let me tell you a little bit about him after we just drop the name of the other new candidate who was only selected for the preliminary squad, Demba Sek. So Demba Sek there. But back to Ibrahim Mbaye, new to the squad, starting one and subbing into one of their 2 November games, so they're kind of excited to get him on the field. He's with Paris Saint-Germain in France there since 2024 and had been with their youth team for 6 years prior to that, and then a couple of other youth teams in France. Mbaye was born in France there. So it'll be interesting to see if the 17-year-old gets on the field. I think they are kind of anxious to put him on the field, as they were in the November game. So let's go to our predictions and see what we had at the end of part one. Actually, we're going to beat Iliman Ndiaye right away as a central attacking midfielder here. But Ismail Assar and Ndiaye kind of started equally in this position. Both of them, though, also started in other positions as well. So our prediction at the end of part one was both of them could be possible starters over here and likely starters somewhere on the field. Let's look at the November games, and we see that Iliman Ndiaye started here in the first game, the first November friendly against Brazil there, and Ismaila Sarr also started that game. He was as the central attacking midfielder there. However, both of those were on the bench for the second game as the exciting newcomer Ibrahima Mbaye got the start against Kenya, and he scored a goal against Kenya too, so scored in his debut game to add to the excitement. So we're going to revise our list slightly. We will stick with Ismaila Sarr and Iliman Ndiaye. We're going to put 2 stars beside both of them because we think it's likely that they will be starters on the field, but just possible that it'll be in that position. So there's 2 stars for Ismaila Sarr. We'll do the same thing when we get to Iliman Ndiaye there. And we're going to put 1 star beside newcomer Ibrahim Mbaye. Generally, what we're thinking of is the starting lineup for game 1, because it gets a little complex if we go beyond that. We really don't think Mbaye will start the first game, but especially if Senegal go deeper into the tournament, we do think he'll get a start in the tournament, and certainly a substitute appearance. Okay, let's go to central attackers here, and we only have the player I've been talking about, Iliman Ndiaye, over here. He's a definite candidate to make the squad, we thought, and so he did. He did make the squad, and let's talk about the position here. The position was used in about a third of the games there, so we think it's only possible that he or Ismaila Sarr will be starters over here, because we think it's not actually that likely they'll use the position. But over here we have Iliman Ndiaye as the likely starter if they do use the position, even though Ismaila Sarr started here in one of the friendlies. But we think the position not being used is actually likely as well. So when we put the 2 stars beside Iliman Ndiaye, we mean it that we think he's likely to start somewhere on the field, but not necessarily in this position. Okay, that's it for central attackers. No, it isn't, because we do have one name that we should have added here, and it is Ibrahima Seck. Ibrahima Seck just making the preliminary squad there. And now we are ready to move on to the forward line. Here we don't have any players coded as secondary strikers. And so let's look at the candidates that we came up with in part 1. We thought Nicholas Jackson was a definite candidate for making the squad, and he did. And Sharif Ndiaye, we also thought he was a definite candidate, even though he's not much of a starter. He also made the squad. Our 2 likely candidates also made the squad. The first one was Boulaye Dia, and the second one, Habib Diallo. Both of those selected for the final squad. And then we had one seemingly off the squad. Let's see. Let's see if the pattern holds of these players being named to the preliminary squad, and it does. Bamba Dieng seemingly off the squad, but making the preliminary squad there. Okay, that's it, because we have no new candidates over here, so we can go and look at our predictions at the end of part 1. We had Nicholas Jackson as a likely starter and Boulaye Dia as a possible starter there. When we look at the November games, we actually saw that Sadio Mane was the starter in the first November friendly. In the second one, it was Nicholas Jackson. So we're just going to change our thinking a little bit. We'll put Nicholas Jackson as the likely starter, and we'll give, Boulaye Dia 1 star for a possible starter, and we'll just mention Sadio Mane as a possible starter. But since we gave him 3 stars, there over in the left attacking midfielder. We really mean that to mean 2 stars for left attacking midfielder and 1 star, a possibility of starting as a forward, as he did in the November friendly. All right, that brings us to the end of section 2, our look at the players, and we move on to section 3. And in section 3, we want to welcome listeners to the short version of our mediacast. And we begin with our spotlight review. I think that's all we'll have time for in the short version, because the injury section is quite long for Senegal, and also I do have some closing comments. So I think the short section will just be the spotlight review. That is a race through basically of what we've done over the last 2 parts of the mediacast. So in part 1, we created a list of players and speculated on the likelihood of making the squad. We put them into categories. And here in part 2, we saw who made the final and preliminary squad, and we speculated on the starters. So we're going to review all that in a very quick run through the team here, beginning with manager Pape Thiaw, and he will consider him a selection for the squad there. So he will lead them through this cup. Next, we have goalkeepers, a definite candidate in Maury Diol, and he was selected for the squad, as were our 2 likely candidates, Edouard Mendy and newcomer Yevan Diouf. Our possible candidate, Samba Mbalo, though, not selected even for the preliminary squad. And we're not going to talk about players below that level, below the level of possible, unless they surprise us and make the squad there. In the case of goalkeepers, there were none. Turning our attention to starters, we put all of our bet behind Edouard Mendy. We think he's a definite starter there. Maury Diol probably the second string keeper there. Okay, central defenders, we had 3 definite candidates. All of them made the final squad. That's Kalidou Koulibaly, Moussa Niakate, and Abdoulaye Seck. And we had no candidates at the likely level, but 2 at the possible level. Neither of them made it, though. Abdou Diallo just making the preliminary squad there, and newcomer Mustafa Mbao not even making the preliminary squad. However, we do have a new player added to the squad, Mamadou Sarr. And, well, we had 3 players added to the squad, but Mamadou Sarr only one making the final cut there. In terms of starters, we have Kalidou Koulibaly as a definite starter, Moussa Niakate as a likely, and then both Abdoulaye Seck and newcomer Mamadou Sarr as possible starters. Left back position, we have a definite candidate in a newcomer El Hadji Malik Diouf, and he was selected for the final squad. And our likely candidate, Ismail Jacobs, also selected for the squad there. And for predictions, we think El Hadji Diouf, or El Hadji Malik Diouf, is a likely starter, and Ismail Jacobs a possible starter. We do think there's a possibility of a rotation there, but we give the edge to Diouf. In the right back position, they struggled to find a player actually coded as a right back. They did have one. I'll tell you about it right away. Anyway, we had out of position Crepin Diatta, who's normally a right attacking midfielder, but we had him as a definite candidate for selection, and he was selected. Our likely candidate, Antoine Mendy, also was selected. Our possible candidate, Ile Camara, is the one who's coded as a right back. He was selected for the squad. However, he was injured shortly before the cup and replaced. In terms of starters here, we think then Crepin Diatta remains the likely starter, and Antoine Mendy a possible starter over here. Moving on up to the midfield, We look at players coded as defensive midfielders. We had none at the definite level, but at the likely level, we had Pape Gay, and he was selected for the squad. Our first possible candidate, Mamadou Lamine Camara, not to be confused with Lamine Camara, who we'll meet soon, actually just made the preliminary squad, but then he was brought back in to replace Ile Camara again. They couldn't find a right back to replace him, is my speculation. So they had to go with a defensive midfielder, Mamadou Lamine Camara, then brought back in and making the final squad. Our other two possible candidates, though, did not. Nampalys Mendy just making the preliminary squad, and Czech Nias not even selected for the preliminary squad there. Before we talk about the predictions, we'll look at central midfielders. Here we had three definite candidates, and all of them made it. Idrissa Gueye, Papamate Sarr, and Habib Diarra, all of them selected for the final squad. And then both of our likely candidates also selected for the final squad. Here's where we meet Lamine Camara, and Pathé Cis is the other one. So five central midfielders there, and combined with our defensive midfielders, that's seven players. So little difficult to predict the starters over here. We landed on Idrissa Gueye as a likely starter, 2 stars, but we would on the graphic, by the way, the 2 stars indicates likely. We'd put it more like 2.5, to be honest. Otherwise, we just have possible starters because it could be any one of several players. So Pape Matar Sarr probably 1.5. Papa Gay, a possible starter, and Habib Diarra, who's recovered from injury. We are putting our necks out a little bit and suggesting that he is a possible starter if he has recovered enough from his long-term injury there. We'll talk about injuries a bit later on. Okay, we move just to left midfielders. They do use a 4-3-3 formation, but we just covered it with defensive and central midfielders. However, they put a new player on the roster who's coded as a left midfielder, and he is in fact the replacement for another injured player who we'll meet soon. So he was originally, I should say his name. The newcomer is Ousseynou Niang. Ousseynou Niang was originally just on the preliminary squad, but called to the final squad to replace an injured player that we're going to meet right away here. So we're not dead sure what position he plays because he doesn't have any caps for the team. Probably a left attacking midfielder because the player he's replacing is a left attacking midfielder, and that's what we're looking at next, left attackers. We have a definite candidate in Sadio Mane, who was selected for the final squad, and so was our likely candidate, Cheick Sabali, also selected. A newcomer was added, Asane Diao, but he ends up being the injured player. So unfortunate for him. He's been struggling with injury a lot over the past 2 years. Asane Diao named to the preliminary squad, but pulled at the last minute and replaced by Niang, who we just met there. In terms of starters over on this side, we give Sadio Mane 3 stars, but really what we mean there is 2 stars. He's a likely starter in this position and a possible starter as a forward. But overall, we think Sadio Mane is a definite starter somewhere on the field. Okay, let's go to the right attack. And we have a definite candidate in Ismaila Sarr, and a possible candidate. Ismaila Sarr was selected for the squad, and our possible candidate, Abdallah Sima, not selected, just making the preliminary squad there. However, we have a newcomer, the exciting 17-year-old Ibrahim Mbaye, joining the squad, selected for the squad. And I think I'm going to introduce the central attacker before we talk about predictions for starters, because they're kind of related. We had just one candidate on our list for central attackers. It was Iliman Ndiaye, and he was selected for the final squad. Now, Ismail Assar and Iliman Ndiaye have kind of been sharing the right attacking and the central attacking position there. And so basically, we're going to give both of them a likely tag as starters on the field, though we're not dead sure what position they're going to choose. In fact, they only use the central attacking formation, a formation with a central attacking midfielder about a third of the time. So that's why Iliman Ndiaye sometimes starts elsewhere. They also sometimes replace Sadio Mane on the left as well. So likely to be starters on the field, both of them. And we give Ibrahim Mbaye 1 star as a possible starter there as well. Okay, we can move on to forwards. And here we have 2 definite candidates, Nicholas Jackson and Sheriff Ndiaye. Both of those selected for the final squad, as were both of our likely candidates, Boulaye Dia and Habib Diallo. Both of those also selected. In terms of starters there, we think Nicholas Jackson is a likely starter. And Boulaye Dia, a possible starter. We also have Sadio Mane here as a possible starter as a forward. All right, that brings us to the end of the Spotlight review, our high-speed run through the squad. And next we move on to surprises. Well, we think it's fairly significant that there are none at either level. So no notable non-selections for Senegal, and no surprise inclusions either. New players, we just have 3, and I will talk about that in closing thoughts because I think it's significant. In terms of new players, we had 3 added to the roster, let's say. It's a bit more complex than that. The first one is central defender Mamadou Sarr. And then we have right attacking midfielder Ibrahim Mbaye. I'm hoping we get to see him on the field. And then we also had left attacking midfielder Asane Dio, but he was withdrawn injured and replaced by another newcomer, Ousseynou Niang. So ultimately 3 new players that we had not covered in part 1 just coming into the squad. Now let's look at the injury list. It was a bit long at the end of part 1 for Senegal. 6 names on the list, but we did know that 2 of them were already recovered from injury, so we can deal with those quickly. The first one, Lamine Camara. Lamine Camara had been out with an ankle sprain from late September, but he did return to play for his club on November 22nd, and he was selected for the final squad. So in our revised list, we'll put him in the recovered from injury section. Also, we knew that Boulaye Dia was recovered from injury as well. Just going to find him on my list here. Boulaye Dia had been out with an ankle injury for the October games, but he has since recovered and played. So Boulaye Dia also recovered. We had 1 player expected back at the end of part 1. That was central midfielder Habib Diarra. And Habib Diarra was out with out for groin surgery, actually, since mid-September. He was expected back in mid-December, and he was available to play for his club on December 14th and did take to the field on December 20th. So Habib Diarra possibly needs a bit more time to build fitness, but we will call him recovered from injury as well. Then we had three players unknown at the end of part one. The first one was Abdou Diallo, the central defender, and he had been out with an unknown injury since late September and an unknown return date. He actually did overcome his injury by late October. It's a bit unclear, though, because he was not called up to play by his club team or by the national team. So we're not sure if he's fully recovered. Ultimately, though, he's just selected for the preliminary squad. His injury tag has been removed, but just selected for the preliminary squad. He had only been a possible candidate in the first place, though, so we're going to put him in the injured but was not a strong candidate category there, because we're not really sure if he was dropped due to injury or just by selection. So Abdou Diallo not joining them for this tournament. The second unknown was Ismail Jacobs, the left back, and he was out with a calf injury since late November, so a fairly recent injury, especially when we did part one, an unknown return date at that time. But Ismail Jacobs did return to action for his club on December 13th and was also named to the preliminary squad. So we can put, named to the final squad. What am I talking about? And so we can put him in the recovered from injury. The last one is forward Habib Diallo, and he was out with a hamstring injury from mid-November with an unknown return date. But some hamstring injuries can be short-term. It turns out this one was. He returned to play for his club on December 7th and was selected for the final squad. So Habib Diallo also recovered from injury. So things going well on the whole for Senegal here, but we did have a couple of new injuries. Both of those players actually named to the final squad and then withdrawn, and that's what the pink highlight represents if you're watching the YouTube feed. So newcomer Ile Camara out with a muscle tear from December 21st. Having last played on December 13th. So, an unknown return date, but he was withdrawn from the squad. So that's very unfortunate, especially since he struggled with injury a lot over the past couple of years. The other one is left attacking winger Assane Diao, and he is out with a recurring hamstring muscle injury. So he had been out for 2 weeks in late November, but he did recover and played for his club team in December. However, a recurrence of the injury just before the cup forced him to be replaced. And so Assane Diao loses his opportunity to participate in a cup there. All right, that is a long injury section for Senegal, but they come out of it okay. And we're going to end with a couple of closing thoughts here on Senegal. Well, I think Senegal is a big danger in this cup because they're combining the high star quality that we see on a team like Ivory Coast. And they're combining that with the small team benefit of having a small group of players who are used to playing together and act well as a unit. Senegal seem to have both of those because they're not putting players in and out the way Ivory Coast is. The starting players tend to start most of the games, so I think they're quite familiar with each other, and that plus their star power makes them a big threat. All right, I'm happy with how that came out. Those are the closing thoughts on Senegal, and let's go to our graphic for the big wrap up here. Okay, there is no big wrap up. We just have to say goodbye and hope you join us for our next team. We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.